You know, the saying goes sometimes, it's the hope that kills you. Well, the hope of Winnipeg coming back after a 4-1 deficit against the Vegas Golden Knights fell just short of being fully realized. Had it happened, maybe the best game in Jets franchise history, but as it was, a valiant effort that just fell short in a critical Game 3. We'll dive into this and the rest of the series on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform of choice, including Apple, Spotify, Google, Megaphone, Odyssey, and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. But most of all, we just really love and appreciate your support, and thank you for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Folks, this weekend hasn't exactly been the easiest for Jets fans, let's be real. We were all really excited and waiting for Game 3, and what an atmosphere. Canada Life Center looked like it was rolling. The crowd was electric. The game was a little bit less than electric, if we're being honest. The first couple of shifts, we lost Josh Morrissey for the evening. He got a knee-on-knee hit and exited the game. It now sounds like he's missing the rest of the series. So that's a huge bummer, to be honest. Morrissey is, quite frankly, irreplaceable. And I've gotten into Twitter arguments, not really arguments on my end, but certainly a lot of people telling me, if you call a Billy Heinola or whatever, he's going to get trampled, and there's no way a kid who's not played much recently is going to, be the fix. And I'm like, at this point, like Stanley and Capobianco really haven't been playing much either, and we all know what those guys are capable of. Vegas is going to feast on whatever defender the Jets put out there. So if you're going to have to choose one, at least find a guy who can kind of do some of the same things that Morrissey does, even if more than likely he's not going to get the same amount of minutes and have the same level of impact. You've got to find puck moving, puck cycling skill, and somebody who could potentially, if all pans out, actually get some power play time. So, yeah, the options to replace Morrissey, it's not feeling good. And to make matters worse, Vegas took a 4-1 lead, throughout the game. At first couple of periods, the Jets basically just got dominated, and Winnipeg really had no answer. Vegas controlled the neutral zone. They controlled defensive zone denials in terms of entries for the Jets into the offensive zone. Inside Winnipeg zone end, Vegas had a couple of good opportunities. Some of the goals that I think, Hellebuyck let through weren't quite as strong as he would usually like them to be. If you're going to get beat, you want to be beat by an amazing shooter. And he certainly had a couple of opportunities where, Eichel squeezed one through, but I think Kelly would be unhappy with his inability to get across and, stop that one shot on the power play. And then what was it, the Colasar or the Stevenson goal? I forget which one. I think it was the Colasar one that was the rebound that he sort of kicked out. I'm sure he's not going to be happy about that one. Just, for the first couple of periods, it felt pretty hopeless. Winnipeg really didn't generate any chances. Vegas kind of ran over the Jets. And then, you get to the third period and suddenly a little bit of a sign of life. Maybe a couple of missed calls either way, a good couple of opportunities for the Jets. And then all of a sudden, Winnipeg starts scoring. Scheifele gets in on the action, and there's a little bit of hope, a little bit of faith, and things start to get rolling. Winnipeg starts pushing the pace. They start creating chances at even strength, and it gets down to the wire. Winnipeg is in the last moment of the game, the last dying seconds, goalie pulled. Adam Lowry, hero, scores the game-tying goal, and things feel unbelievable. The rink explodes, the bench explodes, everyone is on cloud nine. There is genuine euphoria, because now it feels like you're the team of destiny, that you are in the driver's seat, even if you haven't been throughout most of the game. And you know what? Throughout overtime, it felt like the Jets got really close to scoring a couple of times. But unfortunately, the thing that happened was Winnipeg just couldn't get shots on net. They had blocks, they had misses, all sorts of stuff preventing them from getting to Laurent Brossoit. And in the end, a really bad bounce where Samberg was trying to make a pass from the backside of the wall. He ends up deflecting it off of Ivan Barbashev's skate. It somehow goes right to a skater, dead center in the slot, and Vegas scores. I think it was Michael Amadio who had the game winner. Just a heartbreaking moment for the Jets after they pushed so hard, fought through massive adversity, and still came up short. I mean, losing Morrissey forced Pionk to play almost 40 minutes. So, yeah, a double overtime loss, a very bitter defeat, but one where I look at it and I say, well, you know what? The Jets gave everything they had. It came up short, and yes, the first two periods were awful, but you know what? Winnipeg rallied back. They fought and pretty much laid it out all on the ice, and you really can't be upset with the result when it looked like, very early on, it was already out of reach and decided. So the Jets made it interesting. They made it fun. And if you're a Jets team that is, down a couple of your most important players, you've got a fan base that's desperately trying to find something to latch on to, I think that's all you can ask for. If Winnipeg goes down swinging, that's kind of always what I've said over the years. That's what I want to see. I don't care if they win or lose so much as I just want to see them give us 100%. And I think this game, after that first start where they struggled to really give that to us, I think they rallied back in a big way and showed what they can be when they're at their most fun and, electric. I mean, this team got so close to glory and, obviously just came up short in what was a very painful loss. We'll dive into how the Jets can prepare for game number 4. Obviously, you'll be hearing this tomorrow morning, Monday, so game is just a few hours away for those of you who are, excited about watching it on TV. I think my heart is in my throat already, and the game hasn't even kicked off, but you can feel the intensity of this series, how much these teams hate each other. They have beaten the crap out of each other, and the intensity has already dialed up to 11 in one of the most physical series in all of the playoffs. We'll talk about game number 4 in just a moment, but before we go any further, I did want to shout out our friends and partners at Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite event really shouldn't be stressful. Obviously, a lot of you probably go to concerts or, in your case, Jets games, and you're probably looking for a service that can make it as easy and painless as possible, all while saving you money. Gametime is the perfect place to go. They've got great things like flash deals and last-minute tickets. They've got images of seat views, so you'll always make sure that you know what you're getting into when you're buying a ticket. You won't have to worry about obstructed views because you'll always have a preview on hand. And best of all, like I said, you can get last-minute tickets at extremely big discounts. We all love saving money, and that is what, Gametime is all about. They give you a lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, and so much more. Like I said, you can always get previews of your seats as well, so I know I'd like to know where I'm sitting going ahead and know if I'm actually going to be able to watch whatever event or game I'm into. So if you're ready to start going for, the one place that has the best last-minute ticket deals and makes the process of buying tickets an absolute breeze, be sure to go and download the Gametime app right now, create an account, and when you do, be sure to use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL on the Gametime app for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for rejoining us in our conversation about game number 3 and, ultimately game number 4 here for the Jets. Winnipeg obviously is under the gun now in this series, down 2-1, not the worst to be in this position. I'm sure Vegas expected to win both of their home games, and what happened? They got embarrassed in game 1 and had to respond in a big way after having an embarrassing start for game number 2. So, I think the Jets are going to be really upset about having dropped game 3, but I think the bigger concern now is, what do you do without Morrissey? You're already down Ehlers, you're down Perfetti, and now you're down Morrissey. These are 3 of your most critical contributors in some capacity because it either keeps other parts of your lineup in check or, in Morrissey and Ehlers' case, those guys are some of your biggest minute eaters who can create offense from almost nothing. I know Ehlers doesn't really have that much ice time, but in the ice time that he does get, even with all of his shifts being the same as his line mates, he's such a dynamic player, and his presence at both even strength and on the power play is sorely missed. So, yeah, Ehlers may have a shot at coming back. I honestly, I get the vibe that there's something else going on with him, like injury-wise, because he was practicing again in some limited capacities, but I mean, he keeps saying he's okay, but the team hasn't medically cleared him, so I don't know what's going on with him. I don't know if it's an upper body situation. He must have something cracked or maybe fractured after that Hartman hit. Screw Ryan Hartman, man, seriously. What a dirty piece of trash hit that was. But all I know is that the Jets are in a really tight spot. And I think if you're thinking about how Winnipeg can respond, I think the biggest thing is that you're just going to have to feed on the energy of desperation. This team, they're going to have to be aggressive. They're going to have to push the pace, and they're going to have to get uncomfortable and give up opportunities. Hellebuyck is going to have to stand on his head. I mean, these are the recipes for success for what the Jets have always needed, but now more than ever, when you're down talent and you're going to have to now match up against a Vegas team that has started to elevate its game, you have to be able to get into their face right back and not be afraid of the challenge. In terms of who I expect to draw back in for the blue line, I would expect Kyle Capobianco to probably get the nod. Logan Stanley's just not good enough. And I think even when Stanley did play, he got really, really, really sheltered minutes, and that's not going to work for Bones. Rick is going to have somebody who he can trust with at least, a couple of deployments here and there to try and alleviate the stress on the top four and hopefully balance it out a little bit. I do think that the defense is going to take a bit of a hit. Pionk is probably going to get promoted to the first pairing, and let's be real, that's not going to be the best option for the Jets. I know that Pionk and DeMello have occasionally worked before. It's not really been the case this season. So, yeah, all I'm going to say is that at this point, the Jets have to make an informed decision on how to handle this. I think they're going to call up Heinola, and he's probably going to sit as like an emergency option. I really do feel like, even with him having been rusty recently and not, having played a lot of hockey in the past couple of weeks, you probably need to think about maybe giving him a run at some point. It's not going to happen this series, I don't think, but, Morrissey sounds like he might miss more than just this playoff run. If he's out for like the next round, should the Jets advance, you're going to have somebody who can move the puck, who can cycle it, who can make quick one-touch passes, and who can be a genuine transition expert, which Heinola probably is more than most of the other guys. He has plenty of issues with his defensive play, and that also applies to Stanley and Capobianco. Those guys are not stout defenders. None of them are. So, given that, how do you make the most of a crap sandwich? Well, you got to find somebody who can help you move the puck and advance it up the ice, because that's been one of Winnipeg's biggest issues. They find themselves running straight into Cassidy's 1-2-2 or 1-3-1 trap, whatever Vegas runs, where they have their forwards and defenders pretty high up to deny those zone entries and create rapid counters. Winnipeg has not found a way to break that yet. It's been a really hard time, and every time the Jets try and dump and chase it, they oftentimes lose those pursuits and can't really get in. So a lot of energy wasted. It then leads to a quick odd man rush the other way. Vegas hits out at you, and they have been pretty dangerous on those counters. So Winnipeg really can't rest on its laurels. They're going to have to get uncomfortable and take some risks. I just don't imagine this team being able to pull that off without at least one of Ehlers, Perfetti, or Morrissey somehow coming back in this series. And we already know there's probably two of those guys who are not going to be seen against Vegas. One for sure, the other most likely not coming back. So Ehlers, buddy, if you are ready to go somehow, if you can play without like killing yourself through a horrible injury, man, I really hope we see you, because like this team desperately needs his touch. I don't even know what he's going to be like, because that Hartman hit was just savage, and I have to imagine that Ehlers probably has some bones that are not quite intact if we're being realistic. But yeah, it is a rough situation, but this is what championship caliber teams have to overcome in order to truly find the pathway to success. The road was never going to be easy for the Jets. It has gotten harder, but you know what? If any team has shown that they can battle back from some really big moments of adversity, the Jets might be one of those teams this year. We'll see. I'm not going to count them out yet. They've still got plenty of time to right the ship. And if they tie the series 2-2, send it back to Vegas, even up, I like our odds. We'll talk about how some of the other series are going right now, because a lot of teams are finding themselves in situations that are not that dissimilar from the Jets, and some of these teams are probably even favored in their respective series. So we'll cover that in just a moment. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day, and of course, we appreciate your support. Before we go any further, though, I did forget to mention one thing about Winnipeg's playoff performance, especially in Game 3. I think it's important to kind of keep in mind that, a lot of people are going to come for Dylan Samberg, and I feel like that's not really fair. Samberg has really, put on some really strong performances, especially in elevated roles, and I feel like the mistake that he made wasn't even that big of a mistake. It was just more unlucky than anything. He makes a rough pass. It kind of gets deflected at a crazy angle, and somehow ends up right on the stick of a night skater. So, yeah, hopefully, Samberg can recover from this. We really need him to be at his very best, because his very best has been one of the best defenders on this team. So, Dylan, I hope that this hasn't shaken your confidence. I know even DeMello came over and tried to grab him and calm him down, but he's going to be a warrior. He's going to be a tough player, and I expect him to really show up and bounce back. Speaking of bouncing back, a lot of other playoff series are ongoing right now, and teams are kind of fighting for their lives right now. We've seen Dallas just tie their series against Minnesota 2-2. Boston has taken a 3-1 series lead after dismantling the Panthers, and Carolina also has a commanding 3-1 lead against the Islanders. A lot of interesting stuff. Perhaps the most interesting series so far are New Jersey versus the Rangers and Toronto versus Tampa Bay. New Jersey has managed to claw back at least one game in overtime. Wasn't the cleanest outing, but Akira Schmid managed to do enough to get the Devils a much-needed win. Obviously, New Jersey came into this being maybe the favorites with home ice advantage and having such a monstrous season, but this series has really gone against the grain for them. I think they were expecting something very different against this Rangers team, and New York has not really relented. So, very tough start for them, but, maybe they'll rally back and maybe even pull off some sort of a crazy reverse sweep. Who knows? NHL is chaos sometimes. The Maple Leafs themselves have also kind of had a really big rally after a brutal start to the series. That opening game was a disaster, and since then, they've responded with 2 huge wins. For the Leafs, I think getting through this first round would feel like a massive weight lifted off of their shoulders. They've kind of lived in the shadow of being incompetent for years. And despite having a front office that has put them in a really good position to win, they just somehow implode every single playoff run. So maybe this is the one where they finally win a series. Who knows? The Jets should probably not have had a playoff, series win before the Leafs have, but how about them Jets, huh? Otherwise, most of these series are kind of in pretty fun spots. You've got Colorado versus Seattle actually coming to a pretty tight run of form here. Colorado has managed to take the lead 2-1, and in some of their games, they've kind of looked like the superior team by a pretty decent margin, but the Kraken keep hanging in there. Maybe Seattle will have a major bounce-back victory on home ice. We'll see. They are a fun team, but at some point, the sheer depth and skill that Colorado has, it does tend to take over a bit. But at least for the time being, the Kraken are enjoying their first playoff appearance. They've had a great season to get to this point, and after last year's crapshoot and really poor performance, it is nice to see a team like that putting on a good show for the fan bases. Other series, like I said, Dallas has had a major win. Beating Minnesota on the road, definitely a big boost for their confidence. Minnesota's a tough customer, even when they aren't playing that well, still a very difficult team to dislodge. I guess for the Isles, they're probably in full-on panic mode. I think the Horvat trade was expected to go a lot differently than it has so far, and, Carolina, after a really bad run of form heading into the playoffs, they have definitely shown up in a big way, and even with their injuries, they are still getting it done. So, congrats to the Canes. The computer boys, I'm sure, are enjoying their successes so far. And for the Isles, it's do or die, man. That is all you can say for a team that, quite frankly, hasn't had a lot of playoff success recently. Let me know how you think all of these series are going to go and give me your predictions for game number 4 for the Jets. I'm going to be stupid again and say 5-3 Winnipeg somehow. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I got to believe that the Jets are going to win at least one of these home games. If not, you can yell at me in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Everydayers can be sure to catch us on tomorrow's episode to talk about how the Jets did in game number 4, and if it's getting to a game number 6, how Winnipeg can prepare for game 5 and 6, going ahead for what could be a critical series clinching moment on either game 6 or game 7. We'll dive into all of that on tomorrow's episode, but like I said, for tonight's episode, that is all the time that we have. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. We will see you back here tomorrow, and as always, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. As always, thanks for listening, have a great night, and go Jets go.